Hello, welcome back to Fallout 76. Ever since they were initially announced, I've been thinking about doing a video on how ghouls would play. We had precious little concrete information, so of course it was going to be a purely speculative exercise based on what the lore tells you. But a couple of days ago, the creative dev gave us a few more hints, and this might be a good time to talk about this topic. So let me summarize what we know, then add on to that some of the things I've been thinking about in my own time. It's mostly throwing ideas out there, but feel free to let me know what you think and share your own ideas. I doubt that they've fully decided on how ghouls will work, so maybe, just maybe, we might be able to influence how they play when they release next year. Okay, so what do we know?
So to become a ghoul, you have to at least be level 50. You're presented with a quest that kind of goes over what it means to be a ghoul.
So if you want to become a ghoul, you'll need a level 50 plus character to do a new quest. Becoming a ghoul will be a drastic change. Apparently the gameplay systems will be different, so it's not just a new look, right? Earlier talk suggested that it was meant to be a permanent change. In other words, no going back. But in this interview, the creative lead said that you would be able to turn back.
Case, you will be able to revert back to being a human.
Cool.
At no cost to you. Your progress will still remain. If being a ghoul...
I don't want to overinterpret what he said, but he seemed pretty guarded on that point. In light of what we heard previously, I'd say that the safe way is to create a new character to play as a ghoul, or using characters like mules that we don't really care about. In my case, I'll be using a new character.
You have access to 32 new ghoul-specific end-game perk cards to use in addition... 32.
Ghouls will get access to 32 new perks. There's no details on the effects, but previously, data miners found some images of perk cards. They look pretty expensive, especially if those are for the first tier, right? On the other hand, that Arms of Steel would definitely be something I want. But these new perks do bring up a question. How are we going to fit all our current and new perk cards? In my main character, I've got all the attribute boosting legendary perks, but even now I'm still having to sacrifice some perks. So simply giving us 32 new ones, without increasing how many cards we can use at the same time, will just make that worse. Hopefully they do address this in some way. There's also some other data mined images that look like they might be related to cool perks. We can only guess at what their effects will be, but it looks like there's a trend towards radiation related perks.
To being a ghoul is that you're completely radiation resistant. If I were to stub my toe and I got my health down and I drink some dirty water, it'll heal me. If I continue to expose myself to radiation, I start to build that radiation up that I can use in other ways. Ghouls are not, they don't have to worry about hunger and thirst. Instead, they have a feral meter.
On that note, radiation will not cause any damage, and taking radiation will actually heal you. Food and water meters will disappear, but it looks like food buffs will be replaced with radiation bonuses. I'm guessing that we'll get a radiation meter that will work similarly to food. So as you fill up on radiation, you'll get bonuses just like you do with well-fed. I think this will be very easy to do. Just carry a bunch of toxic goo from Westtech and you'll be good to go. Apparently there's also a separate meter that measures how close you are to becoming feral, and when it fills up, nasty things happen. It obviously wouldn't make any sense to permanently lose control of your character, so imagine that you'll either die and respawn, or maybe you'll experience hallucinations and lose control temporarily. But still, it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it. I expect we'll see something like cyberpsychosis in Cyberpunk. So that's what we know from the interview, plus some of my own thoughts on those items. But let's talk about the things that the dev did not talk about. Firstly, how will we turn into a ghoul? From the lore, most ghouls came about because they were exposed to intense radiation when the bombs fell. Most people died, but some turned into ghouls for unknown reasons. But there's also the case of Eddie Winter from Fallout 4. he subjected himself to a special treatment well before the bombs fell in order to become the first ever ghoul. I suspect that the quest we followed to become a ghoul will involve something similar. We'll probably have to craft some kind of serum to become a ghoul, and a different one to become human again. We might also have to carry some kind of chem to reduce our feral meter. This would be the equivalent of how humans use Radaway to remove radiation. Heck, it might actually be Radaway that we have to use. I haven't watched it, but I believe that in the TV series, the ghoul character stayed sane because he was drip-fed Radaway. And if that's the case, then using Radaway could reduce your feral meter, but it might also reduce your radiation, so there's a pro and a con.
I mean, there's some drawbacks to being a ghoul, but there.
The dev briefly mentioned that there'll be quote-unquote drawbacks to being a ghoul, but nothing beyond that. If we look at the lore, one thing that's repeated over and over again is that ghouls are not well accepted in human society. So one obvious drawback would be dealing with factions. A big debuff to charisma when talking to humans is probably the minimum we can expect, and probably the loss of access to some services. They could push it all the way to being shot on sight at faction headquarters, but that's pretty unlikely because there's so many things that are found at those places, like the faction gold vendors in Minerva. But if something like that were to happen, then I'd expect a new ghoul faction to be added, with its own headquarters and vendors. Maybe you don't get blackjack and hookers, but a new ghoul town would be interesting. On the other hand, some NPCs, like feral ghouls, and maybe super mutants, should be friendly to the character. Not sure how much that would change gameplay, but we might get a new companion. Another factor is that ghouls probably won't be able to use power armor. I know that the Lost Champions in the Skyline update use power armor, but I take that as an anomaly. From a lore perspective, a ghoul's rotting flesh shouldn't work with the straps and fittings of power armor, and I think that most people would agree with excluding power armor. But let me take that idea a bit further. What if we gave ghoul characters abilities that would allow them to fight naked or with very little armor? At the moment, barbarian type builds are possible, but really bad. There's legendary properties and perks that give you bonuses if you're not wearing much armor, but compared to the benefits of an unyielding set, they're not very good. So nobody uses them unless they want to laugh. In my opinion, ghoul characters would be a great opportunity to allow something like this, while still keeping things lore friendly. Then also make full health beneficial for ghouls. In Fallout 4 and 76, radiation is a debuff to a player's health. Basically, how much radiation you have acts like a cap on how much health you can have. One of the optimal builds at the moment is to go low health. You deliberately cap your health by using radiation and take advantage of legendaries like unyielding armor. So in many ways at the moment, full health players are somewhat disadvantaged compared to low health players. But I think that ghouls represent an opportunity to put full health builds on a more equal footing. From a lore perspective, capping the health of ghouls with radiation doesn't make any sense. If anything, ghouls should get a health boost and become tougher, right? At the very least, the health bar will have to change to disable the health cap from radiation. Maybe use a separate meter to measure radiation. The food meter could be reused since ghouls won't need food. Or make it so health is capped when you don't have radiation, and as you get some, your health goes up. So effectively, radiation boosts your maximum health. Sort of a reverse of what happens with health meters for human characters now. If you do it right, ghoul characters could make full health naked builds very interesting. Instead of relying on armor to reduce damage, you could simply tank it by relying on radiation to boost your health and regeneration. So I've talked about some of my thoughts on how ghoul characters could be designed to make them distinct from human characters. There's probably many other directions they could go in, but in my opinion, there's lots of things that could be done to make ghoul player characters both different, but still equally viable. It would be a real shame if Bethesda didn't take the opportunity to add some much needed variety to the gameplay. And luckily, from what the creative directors said, it looks like they want to go in that direction.
You have advantages and disadvantages. Some of those will be underlined a bit more to kind of push the two character types apart a little bit, but it's shaping up to be a really exciting feature.
Obviously we don't know anything beyond small snippets, but if it's done right, there's many ways in which this new feature could broaden how the game is played. In any case, pretty much everything is speculation, so take it for what it is, me just throwing ideas out there. Ghoul characters are supposed to come in 2025, so there's probably lots of things that haven't been properly determined, even among the devs. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when new videos come out. See you soon.